My daughter Evelyn hugged me a little too tightly that evening, and I should have trusted my engineer's instinct about structural weakness. That embrace felt calculated, like every beam placement I'd overseen during my 37 years with U.S. Steel in Pittsburgh. What I discovered 3 hours later would prove that even family blueprints can hide fatal flaws beneath their surface. At 78 years old, I've learned to read people the same way I once read architectural drawings for the Heinz Field construction project. Every relationship has load-bearing elements, and that Tuesday night at Evelyn's new house in Shadyside, I could sense something wasn't supporting the weight it claimed to bear. I'd won $2 million from the Pennsylvania lottery exactly 3 weeks earlier, but I hadn't told a soul about it. Old habits from the steel industry taught me to test materials under pressure before revealing their true capacity. The dinner invitation had surprised me. Evelyn rarely called, and when she did, our conversations stayed strictly functional: holiday schedules, Liam's school events, brief updates about her husband Carl's latest business venture. But that afternoon, she'd sounded different on the phone. Warmer somehow. More interested in my well-being than she'd been since her mother passed 4 years ago. I drove my 2018 Buick down Forbes Avenue, past the familiar landmarks that had anchored my life for nearly 8 decades. The Carnegie Library, where I'd spent countless hours studying structural engineering principles in the 1960s. The old U.S. Steel Tower, now renamed but still carrying the weight of my professional legacy. Primanti Bros on the Strip, where I'd celebrated every major project completion with my crew. These places knew my history, my character, my worth, independent of any lottery windfall. Evelyn's house sat on a quiet street lined with mature oak trees, their branches creating natural archways that reminded me of the cathedral ceilings I'd helped design for the Shadyside Presbyterian Church renovation in 1994. The property was impressive. A 3-story Victorian that must have cost 7 figures, far beyond what Carl's consulting work should have afforded. I made a mental note of this discrepancy, the same way I once flagged questionable load calculations in junior engineers' proposals. Carl answered the door wearing clothes I didn't recognize. An expensive sweater that looked Italian, shoes that gleamed like polished steel. His handshake lasted longer than necessary, and his smile seemed practiced. In my experience managing construction crews, men who smile too readily usually have something to hide. "Walter, you look fantastic," he said, guiding me toward their renovated kitchen. "Retirement agrees with you. You seem more relaxed lately." That comment struck me as odd. We'd seen each other exactly twice in the past 6 months. Once at Liam's school play, once at a brief grocery store encounter. How could he possibly assess my retirement adjustment? I filed this observation away. The way I once cataloged unusual stress patterns in structural materials. Dinner progressed with unusual attentiveness from both Evelyn and Carl. They asked detailed questions about my daily routine, my financial planning, my estate arrangements. Professional paranoia from 4 decades in heavy industry made me cautious about revealing specifics, but I noted their persistent interest in my future security plans. Then my phone buzzed, bank alert. 2 transfers from my lottery account, $1 million each. My name wasn't listed as the authorizing party. The room went quiet, except for the gentle hum of their expensive refrigerator. I excused myself to the bathroom, my hands steady despite the magnitude of what I'd discovered. 37 years of solving complex engineering problems had trained me to think systematically under pressure. Someone had accessed my account remotely. The transfers were initiated from a device registered to my home address, my own laptop. I returned to the dining room, maintaining the same composed demeanor I'd used when discovering critical structural flaws during construction inspections. Evelyn and Carl were speaking in hushed tones, but stopped when I appeared. Their expressions seemed expectant, as if waiting for some reaction I hadn't yet provided. The remainder of the evening passed in surreal normalcy. We discussed Liam's upcoming science fair project, Carl's business expansion plans, Evelyn's volunteer work at the Children's Hospital. But underneath the conversation, I could sense a different dynamic. The same tension I'd felt when walking through buildings with compromised foundations. As I prepared to leave, another notification lit up my phone screen. My home security system had activated camera access from an external device. The timestamp showed current activity in my study, exactly where I kept my laptop. I looked up to find Evelyn and Carl watching me intently, their faces displaying an expression I'd never seen before, something between anticipation and triumph. But what I discovered when I accessed that security feed would prove this was just the beginning of a carefully orchestrated plan. The security camera footage from my study revealed a level of planning that reminded me of the most complex engineering projects I'd overseen at U.S. Steel. My daughter Evelyn sat at my desk, typing with the focused precision of someone following detailed instructions, while Carl stood behind her with what appeared to be a stopwatch. This wasn't impulsive theft. This was systematic execution of a predetermined plan. I drove home from Shadyside through the familiar streets of Pittsburgh, my mind processing what I'd witnessed with the same methodical approach I'd used to analyze structural failures during my engineering career. The Duquesne incline glowed against the night sky, its cables supporting tons of weight through principles of physics. I understood completely. Family dynamics, apparently, operated under different laws entirely. My house on Beechwood Boulevard sat dark, except for the study window, where I could see the faint glow of my laptop screen. I parked across the street, watching my own home like a crime scene, and called Harold Weinstein, my attorney and friend since our days working together on the Pittsburgh Convention Center expansion in 1998. "Harold, I need your advice on a delicate family matter," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the circumstances. "Someone has accessed my financial accounts without authorization. $2 million has been transferred without my knowledge or consent." And Harold's response was immediate and professional. "Walter, you need to contact your bank immediately and file a police report. This is felony theft, regardless of family relationships." But I wasn't ready for that level of confrontation yet. 37 years of solving complex problems had taught me the value of gathering complete information before implementing solutions. I needed to understand the full scope of their plan before taking irreversible action. The next morning, Evelyn called at precisely 8 o'clock. Her voice carried an artificial brightness that reminded me of sales presentations I'd endured from equipment vendors who knew their products were substandard. "Dad, Carl and I were talking after you left last night. We're worried about you living alone in that big house. What if something happened? What if you fell or had a medical emergency?" This was textbook manipulation, the kind I'd seen contractors use when trying to inflate project budgets, create artificial urgency around a manufactured problem, then present a solution that primarily benefited themselves. "I appreciate your concern, Evelyn, but I'm in excellent health. My last physical showed no significant issues." "But Dad, you're 78. Things can change quickly at your age. We have that beautiful guest suite upstairs. You could move in with us, at least temporarily. We could help manage your finances, make sure all your affairs are properly organized." There it was, the true objective: complete control over my living situation and financial assets. I'd seen similar tactics used by unscrupulous contractors who isolated elderly property owners, gained their trust, then systematically drained their resources. Over the following days, their pressure campaign intensified with mechanical precision. Carl appeared at my door each morning with coffee from that expensive shop on Walnut Street, insisting I shouldn't go out in the cold. Evelyn stopped by every afternoon with prepared meals, expressing concern about my declining appetite despite my explaining that I'd always eaten simply. The coffee bothered me most. I'd been drinking black coffee since my army days in the early 1960s, and I knew the taste intimately. Carl's offerings had a slightly different flavor profile. Not unpleasant, but distinctly different from what I preferred. When I mentioned this, he dismissed my observation as changing taste buds with age. During one of these visits, Carl spread several documents across my kitchen table, explaining they were tax optimization forms that would help protect my assets from excessive government taxation. The paperwork looked official, but my experience reviewing construction contracts had taught me to scrutinize every clause carefully. "These need to be filed before the end of the month," Carl explained, his tone suggesting urgency. "The new tax laws are changing, and if we don't act quickly, You could lose a significant portion of your savings to increased rates. I examined the documents more closely. They weren't tax forms at all. They were power of attorney agreements and asset transfer authorizations. Carl was asking me to sign away legal control of my property and finances, disguising the request as routine tax preparation. I'll need to have my attorney review these before signing anything, I said, maintaining the same calm tone I'd used when rejecting inadequate engineering proposals. Carl's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, like stress fractures appearing in overloaded steel. Walter, these are time-sensitive. Harold Weinstein is a good lawyer, but he doesn't specialize in current tax law. These forms were prepared by specialists who understand the latest regulations. The pressure was increasing systematically, like load testing on structural supports. They were probing for my breaking point, the precise amount of stress required to compromise my resistance. The next morning, Carl arrived with his usual coffee offering, but this time something was fundamentally different. The liquid had a slightly metallic taste that triggered memories from my early days at U.S. Steel, when we'd occasionally detected chemical contamination in our water supply systems. What happened after I drank that coffee would reveal the true extent of their desperation to control my assets. The metallic taste in Carl's coffee triggered immediate recognition from my engineering background, specifically my early training in chemical safety protocols at U.S. Steel during the 1970s. That particular flavor profile reminded me of industrial solvents we'd occasionally detected in contaminated water supplies, but this was different, more pharmaceutical in nature. My training in materials science had included extensive study of how foreign substances affected structural integrity, and I suspected similar principles might apply to human physiology. I set the cup down carefully, maintaining normal conversation while my mind analyzed the situation systematically. Carl watched my reaction closely, more intently than someone should observe casual coffee consumption. His attention seemed focused on whether I'd finished the entire serving, which raised additional concerns about the substance's concentration and intended effect. Within 30 minutes, I began experiencing mild dizziness and unusual fatigue. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make me consider lying down, perhaps taking an afternoon nap. This wasn't normal for me. Since retirement, I'd maintained the same disciplined schedule I'd followed during my U.S. Steel career, up at 6, breakfast at 7, active until evening. Carl seemed encouraged by my apparent lethargy. "You're looking tired, Walter. Maybe you should rest. These tax documents can wait until tomorrow if you're not feeling sharp today." The correlation was unmistakable. Chemical introduction followed by cognitive impairment, followed by renewed pressure to sign legal documents. This wasn't coincidence, this was methodology. That afternoon, I drove to Shadyside to visit Dr. Robert Chen, a pharmacist I'd known since collaborating on the Children's Hospital construction project in 1989. Bob had provided consultation on medical facility design requirements, and we'd maintained a professional relationship for over 30 years. "Bob, I need a confidential consultation on a sensitive matter," I explained, describing the coffee's unusual taste and my subsequent physical response without mentioning family involvement. Dr. Chen listened with professional attention, asking specific questions about timing, symptoms, and duration. "Walter, what you're describing sounds like possible sedation from benzodiazepine compounds or similar substances. These are commonly used in medical settings, but they shouldn't appear in coffee unless someone introduced them deliberately." He provided me with a discreet testing kit and instructions for sample collection. If someone is medicating you without consent, that's both dangerous and illegal. These substances can interact badly with age-related physiological changes. I returned home with greater understanding of the tactical situation. This wasn't simple financial fraud. This was systematic chemical manipulation designed to compromise my cognitive function and decision-making capacity. The engineering parallels were clear. They were weakening my structural integrity before attempting to rebuild the foundation according to their specifications. The next morning, Carl arrived punctually with his coffee offering. I accepted it graciously, engaged in normal conversation, then excused myself to the bathroom, where I poured most of the liquid into a sample container Dr. Chen had provided. I returned to the kitchen and continued our discussion while pretending to sip from the nearly empty cup. Carl's attention to my coffee consumption was meticulous. He seemed to monitor each apparent sip, timing his conversation to encourage regular drinking. When I set the empty cup aside, his demeanor relaxed noticeably, and he resumed discussion of the tax documents with renewed enthusiasm. I really think we should finalize these today, Walter. The deadline is approaching, and delay could cost you significantly. I maintained my normal response patterns while observing his behavior. This man was implementing a systematic plan to incapacitate and manipulate me, displaying no apparent concern for potential health consequences. The ethical violation was staggering, far worse than any professional misconduct I'd encountered during my engineering career. Over the following days, I pretended to experience increasing confusion and fatigue. I allowed myself to appear more dependent on their assistance, more willing to consider their suggestions about moving into their home for better care and supervision. Evelyn's visits became more frequent and controlling. She began arriving earlier, staying later, and making detailed observations about my daily activities. "Dad, you seem to be forgetting things more often. Yesterday you couldn't remember where you put your reading glasses." This was manufactured evidence. I'd never had difficulty with my glasses, but I played along with her narrative while documenting every interaction in a journal I kept hidden in my bedroom closet. During one afternoon visit, I deliberately acted more disoriented than usual, claiming confusion about recent events and asking repeated questions about basic information. Evelyn and Carl exchanged meaningful glances, the kind of nonverbal communication that indicated coordinated deception. "Maybe we should call Dr. Morrison," Evelyn suggested, referring to my longtime physician. These memory issues could indicate serious medical problems, but I noticed she made no move toward the phone. They didn't want medical professionals involved. They wanted controlled deterioration that would justify their increasing intervention in my affairs. The sample analysis Dr. Chen conducted confirmed my suspicions. "Walter, this coffee contains significant levels of lorazepam, a powerful anti-anxiety medication that causes drowsiness and cognitive impairment. Someone is definitely medicating you without consent." That evening, as I sat in my study, reviewing the documented evidence of systematic poisoning and financial theft, my 12-year-old grandson Liam knocked quietly on my door. His face carried an expression of genuine fear as he whispered, "Grandpa, I need to tell you something important about Mom and Dad." What Liam revealed would expose the true scope of their plan and the immediate danger I was facing. My grandson Liam stood in my study doorway with the kind of terrified determination I'd seen in young engineers reporting critical structural failures during my U.S. Steel career. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady as he closed the door behind him and approached my desk with obvious reluctance to share whatever burden he'd been carrying. "Grandpa, I heard Mom and Dad talking about you when they thought I was asleep," he whispered, glancing toward the door as if expecting discovery. "They were using words I don't understand, but they sounded scary. They mentioned something about medicine and making you sign papers." I set down my pen and gave Liam my complete attention. The same focused listening I'd used when receiving critical safety reports from construction site supervisors. Children, like junior engineers, often observe details that senior personnel missed, and their perspectives could reveal problems hidden by adult assumptions and agendas. "Can you tell me exactly what you heard, Liam? Take your time and don't worry about understanding everything they said." Liam sat in the leather chair across from my desk, the same seat where he'd worked on homework projects during our better days as a family. His account was remarkably detailed for a 12-year-old, suggesting he'd been listening to these conversations for some time. "Dad was on the phone with someone yesterday morning. He said something about final dosage and house title transfer. Mom was writing things down while he talked. Then she asked about timing, and Dad said within the week if everything went according to plan. The implications hit me like discovering load-bearing walls had been compromised during construction. Final dosage suggested they were escalating their chemical manipulation, possibly to levels that could cause permanent cognitive damage or worse. House title transfer indicated they already considered my property theirs to redistribute. There's more, Grandpa. This morning I heard them arguing about what would happen if you got suspicious. Dad said they'd already invested too much to stop now, and Mom said something about making sure you couldn't cause problems for their plan. Liam's information confirmed my worst suspicions about their intentions and timeline. They were approaching a critical decision point, where my continued resistance would force them to take more drastic action. In engineering terms, they were nearing structural failure of their original strategy and preparing to implement emergency modifications. Liam, you've been very brave to tell me this, but I need you to promise me something important. Don't let your parents know we've had this conversation. Can you do that? He nodded solemnly. Grandpa, are you in danger? Should we call the police? The question revealed how clearly he understood the seriousness of what he'd overheard. I needed to protect him from further involvement while using his information to develop an appropriate response strategy. I'm going to handle this situation properly, through legal channels and with professional help. But right now, the most important thing is keeping you safe. That means acting normally around your parents and not mentioning our conversation. After Liam left, I spent the evening analyzing the tactical situation with the same systematic approach I'd used for complex engineering problems. Their timeline was accelerating, their methods were becoming more dangerous, and they'd reached a commitment level that made retreat unlikely. I needed to implement countermeasures immediately. The next morning, Carl arrived with his usual coffee offering, but his demeanor seemed more intense than previous visits. He watched my consumption more carefully, and his conversation focused heavily on my apparent declining health and increasing confusion. Walter, Evelyn and I are really concerned about these memory lapses. Yesterday, you seemed completely disoriented when we were discussing your financial planning. Maybe it's time to consider more comprehensive assistance with your daily affairs. I maintained my performance of gradual cognitive decline while secretly documenting his statements. The pressure for immediate action was increasing, exactly as Liam's intelligence had suggested. Around midday, I decided to test their emergency response protocols. I deliberately fell in my living room, making enough noise to ensure they'd hear from the kitchen where they were organizing my medications. The timing and nature of their response would reveal their true intentions regarding my well-being. Carl appeared first, but instead of immediately checking my condition or calling for medical assistance, he seemed to assess whether I was genuinely unconscious or potentially listening to their conversation. Evelyn joined him, and I heard her whisper, "How much longer before we can move forward?" Carl's response chilled me to the bone. The lawyer said if he's declared incompetent due to progressive dementia, the power of attorney transfer happens automatically. We just need documented evidence of ongoing cognitive decline. They were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent based on symptoms they were artificially creating through systematic poisoning. This wasn't just theft. This was a comprehensive plan to destroy my legal standing, seize my assets, and potentially eliminate me as a witness to their crimes. After several minutes of apparent unconsciousness, I began stirring and acting confused about what had happened. They immediately became solicitous, helping me to a chair and expressing concern about my increasing instability. "We really need to call Dr. Morrison," Evelyn insisted. "These episodes are becoming more frequent and more serious." But again, no actual phone call was made. They wanted documentation of decline, but not professional medical evaluation that might detect their chemical manipulation. That evening, as I sat in my bathroom reviewing everything Liam had risked to tell me, I realized how close I'd come to becoming another family business casualty. My grandson's courage had provided the final pieces of intelligence I needed to take decisive action. What I discovered when I made that crucial phone call would prove that their perfect plan had one fatal flaw they never considered. The phone call I made that evening connected me with Tom Rodriguez, a cyber forensics specialist I'd worked with during the digital infrastructure upgrade at U.S. Steel in 2003. Tom had transitioned from industrial systems security to private investigation, and his expertise in electronic evidence recovery would prove invaluable in documenting the systematic fraud my daughter and son-in-law had implemented against me. "Walter, what you're describing requires professional documentation if you want law enforcement to take action," Tom explained during our conversation. "Family theft cases are notoriously difficult to prosecute without overwhelming evidence. especially when the perpetrators are claiming to act in the victim's best interests. I arranged to meet Tom the following morning at his office on Carson Street, bringing my laptop and all relevant financial documentation. The drive through the South Side reminded me of my early days in Pittsburgh, when this neighborhood housed the families of steel workers who built the city's industrial foundation. Now it was home to technology specialists who could trace digital footprints with the same precision we once applied to structural analysis. Tom's examination of my computer revealed a sophisticated operation. They've installed remote access software that allows complete control of your system from another location. Every keystroke, every password, every financial transaction, they can monitor and manipulate everything you do online. The technical evidence was comprehensive. Login records showed repeated unauthorized access during times when I wasn't home. Email archives revealed coordination between Carl and unknown third parties regarding asset liquidation timelines. Browser history included visits to legal websites, researching power of attorney procedures and elderly competency evaluations. This goes beyond simple theft, Walter. They've been planning this operation for months, possibly longer. The level of preparation suggests significant financial motivation beyond the lottery winnings you mentioned. I provided Tom with additional context about my actual net worth, the $8 million in diversified assets that Evelyn and Carl had likely discovered through their systematic surveillance of my financial activities. The lottery win was just the trigger that accelerated their timeline, not the primary objective of their scheme. Tom's analysis revealed email communications between Carl and offshore banking representatives, discussing account establishment and fund transfer procedures for elderly client asset management. The correspondence made clear they'd been developing international money laundering capabilities well before my lottery win. We need to expand this investigation beyond computer forensics, Tom advised. Your daughter and son-in-law have been building a comprehensive fraud operation. We should involve forensic accounting specialists to trace their existing financial activities. Through Tom's professional network, I connected with Maria Santos, a certified forensic accountant who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. Maria's practice was located in the USX Tower, the same building where I'd attended countless project meetings during my U.S. Steel career, providing familiar surroundings for what would prove to be a crucial consultation. Maria's investigation revealed the true scope of their operation. Carl's consulting business was essentially fictitious, a series of shell companies designed to receive and launder stolen funds. Their expensive lifestyle was financed entirely through fraudulent activities, including identity theft schemes targeting elderly victims throughout southwestern Pennsylvania. Your case isn't isolated, Mr. Hensley. We've identified at least 6 other elderly victims who experienced similar patterns of manipulation and financial exploitation. Carl appears to specialize in targeting widowed men with significant assets, but limited family oversight. The revelation that I was part of a broader criminal enterprise made their threat more serious, but also provided additional evidence for law enforcement action. Maria's documentation showed a clear pattern of predatory behavior that extended far beyond personal family conflict. Meanwhile, I continued my performance of declining cognitive function while secretly recording every interaction with Evelyn and Carl. The pocket recording device Tom had provided captured their increasingly desperate attempts to accelerate my supposed mental deterioration. During one particularly damaging conversation, Carl discussed specific dosage adjustments with someone over the phone while believing I was napping in the next room. The current level isn't working fast enough. We need something that produces more obvious confusion, maybe some memory gaps that would be noticeable to medical professionals. Evelyn's voice joined the conversation. The lawyer says we need documented incidents of dangerous behavior, leaving appliances on, getting lost while driving, inability to manage basic financial decisions. Can we create situations that would generate that kind of evidence? Their willingness to endanger my physical safety for manufactured evidence crossed every ethical boundary I'd encountered during 4 decades in professional engineering. We'd always prioritize safety above profit, schedule, or convenience. Yet my own family was prepared to risk my life for financial gain. The chemical analysis Dr. Chen had conducted provided additional forensic evidence. He'd connected me with Dr. Patricia Washington, a toxicologist at UPMC Presbyterian, who specialized in poisoning cases. Dr. Washington's analysis confirmed systematic dosing, designed to produce cognitive impairment without obvious physical symptoms. Mr. Hensley, the progression of substances in your system indicates someone with medical or pharmaceutical knowledge is directing this poisoning. The dosage, timing, and chemical combinations show sophisticated understanding of how these drugs affect elderly physiology. The laboratory results arrived on Thursday morning, providing definitive proof of systematic poisoning with benzodiazepines and other cognitive-affecting substances. As I reviewed the toxicology report, I realized my grandson had risked everything to give me the warning that might have saved my life. Armed with comprehensive evidence of fraud, poisoning, and conspiracy, it was time to activate the legal and law enforcement resources necessary to stop their operation permanently. Harold Weinstein arrived at my house on Beechwood Boulevard at precisely 8 o'clock Friday morning, carrying the same leather briefcase he'd used during our collaboration on major construction contracts over the past 25 years. His expression reflected the gravity of evidence I'd presented during our emergency consultation the previous evening, comprehensive documentation of systematic fraud, poisoning, and conspiracy that demanded immediate legal intervention. Walter, I've prepared emergency injunctions to freeze all accounts where unauthorized transfers occurred, plus restraining orders to prevent further contact until this matter reaches resolution, Harold explained, spreading documents across my kitchen table. The evidence Tom Rodriguez and Maria Santos compiled provides grounds for immediate protective action. We reviewed the legal strategy systematically, the same methodical approach we'd used when navigating complex construction contract disputes during my U.S. Steel career. Harold's plan involved simultaneous action across multiple fronts: civil asset protection, criminal referrals, and emergency custody considerations for Liam's safety. The most critical element is timing, Harold emphasized. Once we file these motions, Carl and Evelyn will realize their operation has been discovered. Their response could range from flight to more desperate measures against you personally. I'd anticipated this concern and already implemented precautionary measures. The previous evening, I'd contacted Detective Ray Murphy of the Pittsburgh Police Department, someone I'd known since my volunteer work funding the community center renovation in Oakland during the 1990s. Ray had responded to my call with professional seriousness appropriate to the evidence I'd presented. Walter, what you're describing constitutes multiple felonies: elder abuse, fraud, attempted poisoning, conspiracy. We'll coordinate with the district attorney's office to ensure proper prosecution of all charges. Detective Murphy arranged for discreet surveillance of my house and Evelyn's residence, plus electronic monitoring of their communications through legal wiretap procedures. The law enforcement response reflected the systematic nature of their criminal enterprise, not just isolated family conflict. At 9:30, I activated the business network I'd developed during nearly 4 decades in Pittsburgh's construction industry. My property management company, Allegheny Asset Holdings, implemented emergency security protocols for all real estate holdings under my control. This included the 2 commercial buildings downtown, 3 rental properties in Squirrel Hill, and my primary residence. James McAllister, who'd managed my properties since retiring from U.S. Steel in 1998, understood the situation immediately. Walter, we'll change all locks, upgrade security systems, and position security personnel at each location. Nobody accesses your assets without proper legal authorization. The coordinated response reflected lessons learned during complex industrial projects where multiple specialists worked simultaneously toward common objectives. Legal protection, law enforcement investigation, asset security, and evidence preservation all proceeded in parallel, creating multiple layers of defense against continued criminal activity. By midday, Harold had filed all necessary legal motions with Allegheny County Court. The injunctions froze approximately $2.3 million in accounts where unauthorized transfers had occurred, plus additional funds Maria Santos had traced to Carl's shell company network. Their access to stolen money was effectively terminated. Detective Murphy coordinated with federal authorities due to the interstate banking violations and money laundering evidence Tom Rodriguez had discovered, FBI agent Sarah Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen the pharmacist, joined the investigation, bringing additional resources appropriate to the scope of their criminal operation. Mr. Hensley, our preliminary investigation suggests your son-in-law has been operating similar schemes across multiple states. This case could be the key to shutting down a significant elder abuse network. The afternoon brought the most difficult aspect of the entire operation, ensuring Liam's protection without traumatizing him further. Harold had arranged for Child Protective Services consultation, and Detective Murphy coordinated with school officials to monitor his safety during the transition period. I met with Dr. Rebecca Thompson, the child psychologist who would help Liam process whatever consequences emerged from his parents' criminal prosecution. Thompson's office was located near the Carnegie Library, where I had spent countless hours during my early engineering studies, providing familiar surroundings for planning my grandson's future care. Mr. Hensley, Liam showed remarkable courage by providing you with crucial information. Our priority is protecting him from trauma, while ensuring he understands that reporting criminal activity was the right choice, regardless of family relationships. By late afternoon, all elements of our coordinated response were in position. Legal protections secured my assets. Law enforcement surveillance monitored their activities. Security personnel protected my properties, and child welfare specialists prepared to safeguard Liam during whatever confrontation would inevitably follow. Tom Rodriguez provided final technical support by installing recording equipment throughout my house, ensuring complete documentation of any contact attempts Carl or Evelyn might make before learning about the legal action. Every conversation would be preserved as evidence for their eventual prosecution. The evening passed quietly, but Detective Murphy's surveillance team reported unusual activity at Evelyn's house. Multiple phone calls, visitor arrivals, and what appeared to be packing or document destruction activities. Their behavior suggested awareness that their operation was compromised, possibly through contacts in financial institutions or legal networks. Saturday morning arrived with unusual silence. No coffee delivery from Carl. No check-in call from Evelyn. Then, at precisely 10 o'clock, Detective Murphy called with news that would change everything. "Walter, we're moving now. The warrants are being served." When those police cars pulled into Evelyn's driveway, I finally understood that their perfect plan had one fatal flaw they never anticipated: underestimating their intended victim. Detective Murphy's phone call at 10 o'clock Saturday morning carried the weight of 37 years of methodical problem-solving, finally reaching successful resolution. The coordinated law enforcement action I was witnessing represented the same systematic approach I'd used for complex engineering projects. Multiple teams working simultaneously toward a common objective, with precise timing and comprehensive preparation determining the outcome. I drove to Shadyside despite Harold's advice to remain home during the arrests. This wasn't curiosity or vengeance. This was professional obligation to witness the completion of a project I'd initiated and managed through its critical phases. The same instinct that made me personally inspect every major construction milestone now required direct observation of justice being implemented. 3 police cars were positioned strategically around Evelyn's Victorian house when I arrived, their placement reflecting tactical considerations I recognized from security planning during major construction projects. Detective Murphy acknowledged my presence with a professional nod, understanding that my personal investment in this outcome justified my careful observation from across the street. The front door opened before officers could knock, suggesting Carl and Evelyn had been monitoring surveillance activities and recognized the inevitability of confrontation. Carl appeared first, his expression shifting through multiple stages: surprise, calculation, defiance, and finally resignation as the scope of law enforcement response became clear. Agent Sarah Chen approached Carl with FBI credentials visible, her demeanor reflecting the federal implications of interstate banking fraud and money laundering charges. "Carl Morrison, you're under arrest for elder abuse, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempted poisoning. You have the right to remain silent." Carl's reaction was immediately combative. "This is ridiculous. I've been helping my father-in-law manage his finances. He's been showing signs of dementia, making poor decisions about his money. Everything we did was for his protection." Detective Murphy's response was measured and professional. Mr. Morrison, we have comprehensive evidence of systematic fraud, including computer forensics, banking records, toxicology reports, and recorded conversations. Your actions constitute multiple felonies under Pennsylvania and federal law. Evelyn emerged from the house as Carl was being handcuffed, her appearance more disheveled than I'd ever seen during her adult life. The designer clothes and expensive accessories she'd been displaying recently were replaced by casual wear that suggested hasty preparation for potential flight. "Dad, how could you do this to your own family?" she called across the street, her voice carrying genuine shock, despite overwhelming evidence of her active participation in their criminal enterprise. "We were trying to help you. We were worried about your health, your safety." The accusation stung, but my engineering background had taught me to distinguish between emotional manipulation and factual reality. Her concern had involved systematic poisoning, financial theft, and plans for having me declared mentally incompetent. No genuine family care included such devastating betrayal. Agent Chen approached Evelyn with additional handcuffs. "Mrs. Morrison, you're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse and fraud. The evidence shows your active participation in planning and executing these crimes against your father." Evelyn's reaction was different from Carl's combative stance. She seemed genuinely stunned by the situation, as if she'd never considered the legal consequences of their actions. Her response suggested she'd been following Carl's lead without fully understanding the criminal nature of their activities. "I need to see my son," she said, looking around frantically. "Where's Liam? He needs to know what's happening." Dr. Thompson, the child psychologist, had already arrived to facilitate Liam's transition during this traumatic phase. She approached Evelyn with professional compassion while maintaining appropriate boundaries. "Mrs. Morrison, Liam is safe and being cared for appropriately. Our priority is minimizing his trauma during this difficult situation. He'll have opportunities to maintain appropriate contact with you as circumstances permit." The next several hours involved extensive evidence collection from their house, including computers, financial documents, and what appeared to be additional victims' personal information. Maria Santos, the forensic accountant, supervised documentation of assets purchased with stolen funds, including furniture, jewelry, and electronics that would need to be liquidated for victim restitution. Carl's behavior during processing revealed the calculating nature of their operation. He immediately requested an attorney and refused to provide any statements, suggesting prior consideration of legal risks and potential defense strategies. This wasn't impulsive family conflict. This was premeditated criminal enterprise with contingency planning. Evelyn's response was more emotionally volatile. She alternated between expressing concern for Liam's welfare and attempting to minimize her role in their criminal activities. Carl handled all the financial aspects. "I just did what he told me was necessary for Dad's protection." Detective Murphy's experience with family crime cases had prepared him for such deflection attempts. "Mrs. Morrison, our evidence includes your direct participation in computer access, fund transfers, and discussion of poisoning protocols. Your involvement was active and knowing, not passive or manipulated." The media arrived as both Carl and Evelyn were transported to the Allegheny County Jail for processing and arraignment. Local news crews recognized the significance of elder abuse prosecution, especially involving substantial financial amounts and systematic poisoning allegations. I declined interview requests, preferring to let law enforcement and legal representatives manage public communication. My focus remained on Liam's welfare and ensuring his protection from additional trauma during an already devastating situation. As I watched my son-in-law led away in handcuffs, I felt no satisfaction, only profound sadness for the destruction they'd chosen to bring upon our family. But watching Carl attempt to justify attempted murder as elder care revealed the depth of moral corruption that had made this confrontation inevitable. The legal proceedings that followed would determine not only their punishment, but also the framework for rebuilding whatever family relationships might survive this betrayal. The Allegheny County Courthouse on Grant Street carried the same institutional gravity I'd experienced during major construction contract disputes throughout my U.S. Steel career, but this proceeding held far greater personal significance than any professional litigation I'd previously witnessed. Harold Weinstein guided me through the security procedures, with the same careful attention to detail he'd applied to complex business transactions over our 25-year working relationship. District Attorney Michael Chen, again no relation to Dr. Chen or Agent Chen, Pittsburgh's professional community often reflected the city's diverse population in coincidental ways, had assigned senior prosecutor Linda Martinez to lead the case against Carl and Evelyn. Martinez's reputation for elder abuse prosecution was well established, and her preparation for this trial demonstrated the comprehensive approach necessary for complex white-collar criminal cases. The courtroom filled with community members I'd known for decades, fellow retirees from U.S. Steel, neighbors from Beechwood Boulevard, volunteers from the library renovation project I'd funded years earlier. Their presence reminded me that this case represented more than personal betrayal. It was about protecting elderly community members from systematic predation. Carl's defense attorney, Robert Klein, attempted to portray their actions as misguided family assistance rather than criminal fraud. His opening statement emphasized Carl's genuine concern for my well-being and suggested that complex financial management had been necessary due to my declining cognitive abilities. This defense strategy collapsed immediately when Prosecutor Martinez presented the toxicology evidence. Patricia Washington's expert testimony established that my apparent cognitive decline resulted directly from systematic poisoning with pharmaceuticals Carl had administered without medical supervision or consent. The defendant deliberately introduced controlled substances into Mr. Hensley's food and beverages with the specific intent to impair his mental function and compromise his decision-making capacity. Dr. Washington explained to the jury, this wasn't medical care. This was chemical assault designed to facilitate financial exploitation. My testimony began on the second day of proceedings. 37 years of presenting complex technical information to diverse audiences had prepared me for clear, systematic communication under pressure. I explained the timeline of suspicious activities, the systematic nature of their manipulation, and the professional investigative approach I'd used to document their criminal enterprise. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my engineering background taught me to identify structural problems before they cause catastrophic failure, I testified. When I noticed unusual patterns in my daughter and son-in-law's behavior, I applied the same methodical analysis I'd used for complex construction projects. The evidence revealed systematic fraud, not family assistance. The prosecution presented comprehensive evidence of Carl's broader criminal enterprise. FBI agent Sarah Chen testified about similar schemes targeting elderly victims across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. Carl had specialized in identifying widowed men with substantial assets, but limited family oversight, then implementing systematic exploitation protocols. Tom Rodriguez's computer forensics testimony revealed the sophisticated nature of their operation. The defendants had installed comprehensive surveillance software on Mr. Hensley's computer, monitoring every financial transaction, email communication, and online activity. They possessed complete information about his assets, legal arrangements, and daily routines. Maria Santos presented forensic accounting evidence tracing stolen funds through multiple shell companies and offshore accounts. Her analysis revealed that Carl and Evelyn had stolen approximately $2.4 million from me, plus additional amounts from other elderly victims, funding an expensive lifestyle completely disconnected from legitimate income sources. Evelyn's defense proved more complex than Carl's straightforward denial strategy. Her attorney, Patricia Wong, attempted to present her as a manipulated spouse who'd been deceived about the true nature of their activities. This approach required Evelyn to testify against Carl while accepting responsibility for her own participation. I thought we were helping my father manage his finances during a difficult period. Evelyn testified, her voice barely audible. Carl convinced me that Dad was showing signs of dementia and needed professional assistance. I didn't understand that we were stealing from him. But Prosecutor Martinez's cross-examination revealed the implausibility of this claim. Evelyn had directly accessed my computer, initiated fund transfers, and participated in discussions about dosage adjustments for the substances they were administering. Her involvement was active and informed, not passive or deceived. The most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. Dr. Rebecca Thompson presented a video statement from Liam, carefully prepared to protect him from courtroom trauma while preserving his crucial evidence. My 12-year-old grandson's account of overheard conversations about final dosages and title transfers provided devastating insight into their true intentions. Community impact statements revealed the broader significance of this prosecution. Other elderly victims of Carl's schemes testified about similar experiences: systematic manipulation, financial theft, and attempts to isolate them from professional assistance. The pattern was clear and repeated across multiple cases. Carl's defense collapsed entirely when Prosecutor Martinez presented recorded conversations from the surveillance equipment Tom Rodriguez had installed in my house. Carl's own voice discussing dosage increases and accelerated timeline for competency proceedings eliminated any possibility of claiming innocent intent. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges against both defendants. Carl's conviction included elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, attempted poisoning, and racketeering charges related to his broader criminal enterprise. Evelyn's conviction covered conspiracy, fraud, and elder abuse, with reduced charges reflecting her somewhat lesser role. Judge Patricia Morrison scheduled sentencing for the following month, but I knew that whatever punishment they received couldn't repair the damage they'd inflicted on our family relationships. The real challenge would be rebuilding trust and protecting Liam's future. After the verdict was announced, I realized that achieving justice was only the beginning of a much longer process of family recovery and prevention of similar crimes against other vulnerable elderly community members. Judge Patricia Morrison's sentencing hearing took place on a cold February morning that reminded me of the winter days during major construction projects, when we'd reach critical milestones despite challenging conditions. The same Allegheny County courthouse that had witnessed their conviction now prepared to deliver consequences proportionate to the systematic betrayal they'd inflicted upon family relationships and community trust. Carl received 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, reflecting both the severity of elder abuse charges and his role as the primary architect of criminal enterprise, affecting multiple victims across several states. Judge Morrison's statement emphasized the calculating nature of his crimes and their devastating impact on elderly community members' faith and family relationships. Mr. Morrison, you exploited the most fundamental bonds of trust, family connections, and community relationships to systematically victimize vulnerable elderly individuals, Judge Morrison declared. Your actions represent predatory behavior that demands significant consequences to protect other potential victims and restore community confidence in elder safety. Evelyn's sentence was more complex, reflecting her dual role as criminal participant and fellow victim of Carl's manipulation. She received 8 years in federal prison, with possibility of parole, after serving 5 years plus mandatory restitution payments and supervised probation following release. The court recognized her cooperation during prosecution, while maintaining accountability for her active participation in criminal activities. Most importantly for family recovery, I was granted immediate legal guardianship of Liam, ensuring his stability during his parents' incarceration and providing foundation for healthy development, despite traumatic circumstances. Rebecca Thompson's recommendation had been crucial in securing this arrangement, emphasizing Liam's courage in reporting criminal activity and his need for consistent, trustworthy adult guidance. The guardianship hearing had been particularly meaningful, conducted in the same courthouse where I'd once testified about construction safety standards for public buildings. Liam sat beside me with dignity, remarkable for a 12-year-old facing such adult complexities, answering Judge Morrison's questions about his preferences and concerns with honesty that reflected his fundamental integrity. Grandpa has always been honest with me, Liam testified when asked about his desired living arrangements. Even when telling me the truth was difficult, he explained things so I could understand what was really happening. I trust him to take care of me. Harold Weinstein had prepared comprehensive legal arrangements to protect Liam's interests during this transition period. A trust fund established from recovered stolen assets would ensure his educational expenses through college, plus psychological counseling support for as long as necessary. The structure reflected lessons learned from my own estate planning, protecting family members while maintaining clear boundaries and accountability. Asset recovery proved more successful than initially expected. Maria Santos' forensic accounting had traced stolen funds through multiple accounts, enabling seizure of approximately $2.1 million in liquid assets, plus real property. Carl and Evelyn had purchased with theft proceeds. Their expensive house in Shadyside would be sold, with proceeds distributed among identified victims according to calculated losses. The broader impact of this prosecution extended beyond personal justice to community protection. FBI agent Sarah Chen reported that evidence from our case had enabled prosecution of Carl's criminal network across 3 states, resulting in additional convictions and asset recovery for elderly victims who might never have achieved justice independently. Dr. Patricia Washington's testimony about systematic poisoning techniques had prompted new training protocols for medical professionals, pharmacists, and elder care providers throughout southwestern Pennsylvania. Her expertise had identified warning signs that could help detect similar cases before they reached dangerous levels of chemical manipulation. During the months following sentencing, Liam and I established new routines in my Beechwood Boulevard house. His bedroom was converted from my former study, providing space for homework, hobbies, and the privacy appropriate for a teenager adjusting to dramatically changed family circumstances. We maintained his enrollment at the same school, preserving friendships and educational continuity during this difficult period. Our daily conversations became opportunities for processing complex emotions about justice, forgiveness, and family relationships. Liam's questions were often profound, reflecting his struggle to understand how parents who claimed to love him could simultaneously commit such devastating crimes against someone they supposedly cared about. "Grandpa, do you think Mom and Dad really believed they were helping you? Or did they always know they were stealing?" he asked one evening, while we reviewed his science project about structural engineering principles. The question required careful consideration, balancing honesty about their criminal behavior with age-appropriate explanations that wouldn't destroy his capacity to form healthy relationships in the future. "Liam, I think your father knew exactly what he was doing from the beginning. Your mother may have started by believing his explanations, but she eventually understood the truth and chose to continue participating. Both made wrong choices, but their motivations were different." Community support during this period was remarkable. Neighbors, former colleagues, church members, and friends provided practical assistance and emotional encouragement that reminded me why Pittsburgh had remained my home for nearly 8 decades. The same community bonds that Carl had attempted to exploit for criminal purposes now offered genuine care and protection. Mrs. Henderson from next door began including Liam and me in her weekly grocery shopping trips. The O'Brien family invited us for Sunday dinners. Former U.S. Steel colleagues established an informal network, ensuring we had reliable assistance for household maintenance, transportation, and emergency support. 6 months after sentencing, I received a letter from Evelyn in federal prison, the first communication since her arrest. Her words revealed genuine remorse for the first time, but also raised complex questions about forgiveness, family relationships, and Liam's future connection with his mother. What emerged from the ashes of family betrayal was something I never expected: a deeper understanding of real family values and the foundation for helping other families avoid similar devastation. Evelyn's letter arrived on a Saturday morning in late September, when the autumn light streaming through my kitchen windows reminded me of countless September mornings during my U.S. Steel career when new projects began with optimism and careful planning. Her handwriting was smaller than I remembered, more tentative, as if the words themselves carried weight she wasn't certain she could bear. "Dad, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I need you to understand that losing you and Liam has made me realize what I destroyed through my choices. Prison counseling has helped me see how Carl manipulated my fears about financial security, but that doesn't excuse my participation in hurting you. I'm grateful you're protecting Liam and giving him the stability he deserves. Reading her words at my kitchen table, I felt the complex emotions that had sustained me through 40 years of managing difficult construction projects, where human error could have catastrophic consequences. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or minimizing damage. It was about choosing constructive response over destructive revenge, building something positive from the rubble of what had been destroyed. Liam and I discussed the letter during our evening walk through Shenley Park, a routine we'd established to provide regular opportunities for processing the ongoing complexities of our situation. At 13 now, his understanding of adult motivations had matured considerably, though his fundamental need for security and honest communication remained unchanged. "Do you think we should write back to Mom?" he asked, kicking fallen leaves along the path where I'd walked for decades, through all seasons of life and career. "That's ultimately your decision, Liam. My role is to support whatever relationship with your mother feels healthy and appropriate for you. Forgiveness doesn't require immediate trust, and maintaining boundaries doesn't mean abandoning all connection." Our conversation was interrupted by a familiar voice calling my name. Rebecca Thompson approached us with her usual professional warmth, accompanied by a woman I didn't recognize, someone approximately my daughter's age, with the slightly hesitant demeanor of someone facing difficult circumstances. "Walter, I'd like you to meet Sarah Williams. She's dealing with a family situation similar to what you experienced, and I thought you might be willing to share some guidance about resources and legal options." Sarah's story was disturbingly familiar, adult children expressing sudden concern about her living independently, offering to help manage her finances, introducing changes to her daily routine that seemed caring but felt controlling. She'd recognized warning signs partly because media coverage of our case had raised community awareness about elder abuse patterns. This conversation marked the beginning of what would become my most meaningful retirement activity, working with Dr. Thompson, Detective Murphy, and other professionals I'd met during our legal proceedings. I began consulting with elderly community members who suspected family manipulation or financial exploitation. My engineering background proved invaluable for systematic evidence gathering and documentation. The same analytical skills I'd used for structural problem solving applied effectively to identifying manipulation patterns, gathering proof of financial irregularities, and coordinating professional resources for comprehensive response. Within 6 months, our informal consultation network had helped 12 elderly Pittsburgh residents identify and stop various forms of family exploitation. The work was emotionally difficult but profoundly meaningful, transforming my personal experience of betrayal into community protection and empowerment. Harold Weinstein helped me formalize this activity by establishing the Eleanor Hensley Foundation for Elder Protection, named after Liam's grandmother and my late wife. The foundation provided legal consultation, forensic accounting, computer security, and counseling services specifically for elderly individuals facing family financial manipulation. The foundation's first major initiative was developing educational programs for senior centers, libraries, and community organizations throughout southwestern Pennsylvania. These presentations covered warning signs of elder abuse, resources for getting help, and practical security measures for protecting personal information and financial assets. Liam participated enthusiastically in foundation activities, understanding that his courage in reporting his parents' criminal behavior had protected not only me but potentially many other elderly community members. His involvement provided positive meaning for traumatic experiences while developing his understanding of civic responsibility and community service. During one particularly memorable presentation at the Carnegie Library in Oakland, Liam addressed an audience of seniors and their family members about recognizing when adults aren't behaving appropriately. His perspective as a child who'd witnessed criminal behavior offered unique insights that adult professionals couldn't provide. "Sometimes grown-ups do wrong things and try to make kids think it's normal or necessary," he explained with remarkable poise. "But kids usually know when something feels wrong, even if they can't explain exactly why. It's important to tell trusted adults when you're worried about someone's safety." The foundation's success attracted attention from aging advocacy organizations throughout Pennsylvania and neighboring states. We began consulting on policy development, training programs for professionals, and resource coordination for comprehensive elder protection initiatives. 2 years after Carl and Evelyn's sentencing, I could see how the destruction they'd attempted to create had ultimately generated protection and empowerment for hundreds of elderly community members. The foundation had prevented estimated losses exceeding $3 million, while helping preserve family relationships through early intervention and education. Liam was thriving academically and socially, his experience with adult criminal behavior having developed wisdom and empathy remarkable for his age. We maintained limited correspondence with Evelyn, supporting her efforts at rehabilitation while maintaining clear boundaries about trust and future relationships. On the third anniversary of my lottery win, the event that had triggered their criminal acceleration, Liam and I visited Eleanor's grave at Homewood Cemetery. We brought flowers and shared updates about Foundation activities, maintaining connection with her memory while acknowledging how much our understanding of family values had evolved. "Grandpa, do you think Grandma would be proud of what we've built from all this mess?" Liam asked, arranging the flowers with care. Looking across the cemetery toward the Pittsburgh skyline, where I'd spent my career building structures designed to last for generations, I felt confident about my response. "Liam, your grandmother always believed that real wealth comes from protecting people you care about and contributing something meaningful to your community. I think she'd be very proud of the man you're becoming and the work we're doing together." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cemetery grounds, reminding me that even the longest careers and the strongest structures eventually give way to new generations and different approaches. But the foundation we'd built for protecting elderly community members would continue long after my involvement ended, supported by principles Eleanor had taught me about genuine family values and authentic community service. That evening, as Liam worked on homework at the kitchen table where Carl had once tried to poison me, I reflected on the unexpected journey from victim to advocate that had defined my late life purpose. Sometimes the greatest gifts emerge from the most devastating betrayals, if we have courage to transform pain into protection for others facing similar challenges.